The room reeks of lilac, the one scent Lady Winifred hated. Poirot stood at the threshold. He did not enter. His gaze swept once, then twice. "Lilac," he said. Hastings sniffed. "Yes, strong." Poirot's eyes fixed on the vanity. The mirror gleamed. Too clean. Too high a wipe, for the lady's height. "Step in, Hastings." I obeyed. The carpet was cool underfoot. Ash grit near the hearth. Poirot pointed. A brooch lay beside the rug edge, its clasp bent, metal slightly scratched. I crouched. "Dropped?" I asked. Poirot shook his head. "No, mishandled." By the fireplace, dust prints broke the even layer. 2. Both narrow. One slightly turned inward. Dr. Willen stepped in. His bag clicked shut. "Unfortunate accident," he said. "Head struck here." He tapped the mantel edge. Poirot didn't answer. He studied the hearth ash again. "Lady Winifred was tall?" The doctor nodded. Poirot glanced at the mirror. Top right corner. A faint smear. Wiped in a single stroke. "From the fall?" Hastings asked. "No," Poirot said. "From after." The smell of lilac was heavier near the vanity. Poirot leaned close. He took a handkerchief from his pocket, pressed it to the wood. "Still wet," he murmured. I frowned. "Perfume?" "Yes." "Applied after death." Poirot's gaze moved to the chair near the wall, its cushion slightly out of place. He knelt, brushed the fabric. A tiny white fleck fell into his palm. "Powder," he said. "Face powder. Not the lady's shade." "Whose?" I asked. "We shall see." He stood, walked to the bed. One glove lay across the pillow, silk, the other missing. "Strange," Hastings said. "She would never—" Poirot cut in. "No assumptions." He crossed to the dressing table, opened the top drawer. Inside, a comb with 2 strands of dark hair. The lady's was fair. Poirot held the hair to the light. "Not hers." Dr. Willen cleared his throat. "If you have questions, better now than later. I must leave." Poirot nodded without looking at him. "Thank you, doctor." The doctor left. Poirot returned to the vanity, studied the frame of the mirror, tilted his head, leaning closer, narrowed his eyes at the top edge. Poirot reached up with tweezers, pinched something loose, held it to the light. A single thread, dark blue, the exact shade of the maid's uniform. Mr. Blaine locks the study door. Before he speaks, the latch clicked. Blaine's hand stayed on the key. He turned it twice. Poirot waited. Hastings stood beside the desk. Blaine's face was tight. "You understand," Blaine began. "This is private." Poirot nodded once. "No police noise," Blaine said. "No headlines." Poirot asked, "Even in such a case?" Blaine's reply was sharp. "Yes, especially in such a case." He walked to the desk, opened the top drawer, took out a folded paper. He did not hand it over. Poirot's eyes stayed on it. "What is that?" Blaine's grip tightened. "A letter," he said. "It is not for the inspector." Hastings asked, "From whom?" Blaine didn't answer. He slid the paper back into the drawer. Poirot moved his gaze to the mantel clock. It ticked steadily. "You run the house by time?" Blaine gave a short nod. "Breakfast at 8, lunch at 1, tea at 4, supper at 7. Poirot asked, "Always?" "Always," Blaine said. Poirot wrote the times in his notebook. "On the day of the death?" "The same," Blaine said. "No one broke the order." Poirot's pen stopped. "No one?" Blaine hesitated. "I believe so." Poirot closed his notebook. "Belief is not enough, monsieur." Blaine shifted. His hand moved toward the drawer again. This time he pulled the letter out, unfolded it, scanned the lines. Poirot leaned forward. "May I?" Blaine's hand drew back. His eyes fixed on the signature. "You see?" Blaine said slowly. "Some things should remain in this room," Poirot asked. "Even from justice?" Blaine's jaw tightened. "I call this protection." Hastings stepped forward. "Sir, if it helps the case—" Blaine cut him off. "It will not." Poirot's tone stayed even. "You are certain?" "I am," Blaine replied. Blaine's free hand opened a side drawer. Inside was a brass ashtray. Next to it, a box of matches. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You intend—" Blaine struck a match. The flame caught. He held the letter above it. Paper curled. Ink darkened. The flame reached the signature. Poirot stepped forward. Blaine dropped the burning letter into the ashtray. It turned to black fragments. The name was gone. In the kitchen, nobody says murder. Everyone says accident. Poirot entered first. Hastings followed. Mrs. Broomley stood by the table. Her hands were firm on the cloth. Her face gave nothing. "Nasty business," she said. "An accident." Poirot's eyes flicked to Nancy Elms. She stood near the sink, hands gripping a dish towel, skin pale. "You were on duty?" Poirot asked. "Yes, sir," Nancy said softly. Mrs. Broomley cut in. "She was doing the silver. I was in the pantry." Poirot moved to the side. Riggs was at the door. His eyes stayed down. "You fetched perfume?" Poirot asked him. Riggs nodded. "Yes, sir." "Lilac?" "Yes." "For the lady?" "Yes." Poirot's tone was flat. "She disliked lilac." Riggs swallowed. "That's what I heard." Hastings stepped forward. "When did you buy it?" "Yesterday, late morning." Poirot tapped his notebook. "You told Blaine it was for the lady." "That's what I was told to say," Riggs replied. Mrs. Broomley's head turned sharply toward him. "Mind your work," she snapped. Poirot shifted back to Nancy. "Did you see the lady before she died?" Nancy hesitated. "Yes. Alone." Number Mrs. Broomley was nearby. Mrs. Broomley's voice was hard. "I did not speak to her." Poirot wrote a line. "Do you own gloves?" "Yes, sir," Nancy said. "Blue uniform gloves?" "Yes." Hastings glanced at Poirot. Poirot asked, "Were they both present this morning?" Nancy's fingers tightened on the towel. "One is missing," she said. Poirot looked at Mrs. Broomley. "You are the housekeeper." "Yes." "You set the staff's duties?" "Yes." "Yesterday, who cleaned the drawing room?" "Nancy." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You knew the lady hated lilac?" "Yes." "And you still allowed Nancy to wear it?" Mrs. Broomley's lips pressed thin. "She wore no perfume." Hastings said, "But we smelled—" Mrs. Broomley cut him off. "You smelled nothing here." Poirot made another note, closed the notebook, did not move. The kitchen stayed quiet. A plate clanked in the sink. Nancy jumped slightly. Riggs cleared his throat, still avoided eye contact. Poirot asked, "What does imitation mean to you?" Nancy looked down. Mrs. Broomley spoke instead. "Cheap copying," she said. Poirot's gaze stayed on Nancy. She did not look up. He stepped toward her. "Who are you copying?" No answer. Mrs. Broomley's jaw tightened. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Check the laundry basket," she hissed. "One glove missing, one glove damp." Mrs. Broomley led them to the laundry room. The basket was on the floor. Poirot knelt beside it. He lifted the lid. Inside, folded towels. Under them, a pair of gloves. One was gone. The remaining glove felt damp. Poirot turned it over. A faint powder dusted the palm. "Talc," he said. Hastings peered closer. "From the dressing table." "Perhaps," Poirot replied. He brought the glove to his nose. The scent was faint, but distinct. Lilac. "Lady Winifred's?" Hastings asked. Poirot shook his head. "This glove is smaller." He slid his fingers inside. "The fit is not hers. Too tight for her hand." Mrs. Broomley crossed her arms. "Belongs to the maid," she said. Poirot examined the stitching. Neat, but irregular. Borrowed pair, he asked. Mrs. Broomley hesitated. Could be. Uniform issue sometimes mixes. Poirot's thumb traced the seam. One thread was frayed. Worn often, he said. He set the glove down on the table. The linen around it was warm. From the drying press? Yes, Mrs. Broomley replied. Riggs stood at the doorway. He shifted his weight. You found it there? Poirot asked him. I didn't look, Riggs said. Hastings glanced at Poirot. Why hide it? Poirot didn't answer. He picked up the glove again, turned it inside out. The lining was clean, except for the wrist edge. He scraped it with his nail. A pale residue came off. Polish, he said. Mrs. Broomley frowned. Polish from where? Poirot didn't reply immediately. Where is the other glove? Nancy entered quietly. I haven't seen it since morning, she said. You wore them? Poirot asked. Yes. Then I took them off to clean the drawing room. Both together? Yes. And now? One is missing, Nancy said. Poirot's gaze stayed on her face. You cleaned the mirror. She shook her head quickly. Number Wine dusted the mantel. Hastings stepped closer. What about the vanity? No, Nancy replied. Poirot placed the glove on the table again. He leaned closer to the cuff. The frayed thread caught his attention once more. He turned to Mrs. Broomley. Any other uniform gloves missing? Not that I know of, she said. Poirot wrote in his notebook, underlined a word twice, closed it. On the glove's wrist, barely visible, was a faint smear. Not dust, not talc, mirror polish. Riggs swears he hates perfume, but he fetched lilac yesterday. Poirot faced Riggs in the hall. You went to the chemist, Poirot said. Yes, sir, Riggs replied. What did you buy? Lilac perfume. You dislike perfume? Yes. Then why buy it? I was told to. By whom? Riggs hesitated. Mrs. Broomley. Hastings frowned. For the lady? That's what she said, Riggs answered. Poirot's tone stayed flat. She despised lilac. I know, Riggs said quietly. Poirot's hand moved to his pocket. He pulled out a folded slip. This is the chemist's receipt, he said. Riggs glanced at it. The paper crackled. The ink was fresh. Yesterday, Poirot continued. Time of purchase, 11:42. Riggs nodded once. That's about right. Poirot leaned forward. At that time, where should you have been? Riggs shifted. Driving Lady Winifred to the dressmaker. But you weren't. Number she cancelled at the last moment. Hastings spoke. So, you had a gap in the day? Yes, Riggs replied. Quarter of an hour, Poirot asked. About that. Poirot checked his notes. That gap matches the trip to the chemist. Riggs said nothing. Who paid? Poirot asked. Mrs. Broomley gave me the money. Poirot tapped the receipt. No note. Number just the cash. Hastings asked, Did she tell you why? Number only, to bring it back quickly. Poirot's eyes stayed on Riggs. You handed it to her? Yes. And she? I don't know. I went back to the garage. Poirot paced once. Described the bottle. Clear glass, gold cap, boxed. Hastings glanced at Poirot. That's not the lady's usual brand. Exactly, Poirot said. Riggs rubbed his hands together. I didn't think it mattered. Poirot's voice was low. Everything matters. He pointed to the garage ledger. Write the trip in. Riggs took the pen, wrote slowly. Poirot took the ledger, compared the handwriting to the receipt signature. Different. You didn't sign for it? No, Riggs said. Who did? The shop girl. I paid cash. Poirot placed the receipt back in his pocket, closed the ledger. Thank you, he said. Riggs looked uneasy. Am I in trouble? That depends, Poirot said. Hastings stepped closer. "If it wasn't for the lady," Riggs interrupted. "I told you it was for her." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "No," he said. Poirot smiled faintly. "Then, who was the gift for?" "The clasp is bent." "Not stolen, mishandled?" Poirot held the brooch between thumb and forefinger. "The clasp was bent. Not torn, not snapped." "This is not theft," Poirot said. Hastings leaned closer. "Then what?" "Mishandling," Poirot replied. "By someone careless or hurried." Mrs. Broomley stood nearby. "That was found by the rug," she said. Poirot turned the brooch over. A faint scratch crossed the back plate. He touched it lightly. Hastings asked, "Dropped in a struggle?" "Possible," Poirot said. He set the brooch on the table. From his pocket he took a small magnifier. He examined the clasp hinge. A thin strand clung to the pin. Poirot eased it free. It stuck slightly to his finger. "A hair," he said. Mrs. Broomley frowned. "From the lady? We shall see." Poirot slipped the hair into a paper fold, placed it in his vest pocket. "Who last saw the lady wearing this?" Poirot asked. Nancy stepped forward slowly. "Yesterday morning," she said. "You admire her jewelry?" Nancy nodded once. "Yes, always." "Ever try it on?" Nancy's eyes dropped. "Only once. She allowed me." Mrs. Broomley gave a short, sharp breath. "She shouldn't have." Poirot's gaze moved between them. "You dress to copy her?" Nancy's lips pressed tight. "Sometimes." "Clothes as well?" "Yes." "Perfume?" Nancy's pause was long. "Yes." Hastings looked at Poirot. "Imitation," he said. Poirot nodded. "A dangerous habit." Mrs. Broomley spoke quickly. "I found threads on the vanity," she said. "From the uniform. She had been there." Poirot asked, "Before or after the death?" Mrs. Broomley shook her head. "I can't say." Poirot returned his attention to the brooch. The hinge showed no sign of force. It had been opened in the normal way. He tapped the table. "Why remove it?" Nancy said nothing. Hastings asked, "Could it have fallen?" "Not easily," Poirot said. "The clasp is strong when closed." He looked at Mrs. Broomley. "Where was the lady when you last saw her with it?" "In the drawing-room," she replied. "And the maid?" "In the hall, dusting." Poirot placed the brooch back on the cloth. The metal left a faint mark on the surface. He opened his notebook, wrote 2 short lines, closed it again. Nancy shifted her feet. Her hands were tight at her sides. Poirot watched her. She did not meet his eyes. Poirot removed the folded paper from his pocket. He held the hair to the light. It was not the lady's color. Dr. Willen's time of death floats within an hour. Poirot stood near the desk. Dr. Willen opened his case. "Time of death?" Poirot asked. The doctor looked at his notes. "Between 3 and 4, he said. Hastings frowned. "That's a wide range." Dr. Willen nodded. "Yes." The body was cool, but not fully cold. Fire in the room delayed cooling. "No signs of strangulation?" Poirot asked. "None," the doctor replied. "Cause?" "Impact to the right temple. Blunt edge. Likely the mantle corner." Poirot tapped his chin. "She fell?" "Possibly. But the angle is odd," Dr. Willen said. "Odd in what way?" Hastings asked. "From that position, a direct fall is unlikely. She may have been turned or moved after impact." Poirot glanced at the fireplace. The corner matched the height of the lady's head. He walked to the hearth, bent down. Ash fragments were scattered. Some were disturbed. "Someone stepped here," Poirot said. The doctor closed his bag. "Nothing more medical I can add. The injury is simple, but fatal." Poirot straightened. "You examined her hands?" "Yes, no defensive wounds." "Which suggests she did not expect the blow," Dr. Willen replied. Poirot's eyes moved to the mirror. "You noticed the glass?" The doctor shook his head. "No." Poirot stepped closer to the vanity. The smear on the top corner was still visible. "See this?" he asked. Dr. Willen looked. "Yes. Wiped clean." "Why would someone wipe there?" Hastings asked. "Perhaps to remove a mark," Poirot said. The doctor asked, "After the fall?" "Yes," Poirot replied, "and in a hurry." Hastings frowned. "Could it be dusting?" "Not at this time," Poirot said. "The rest of the glass is untouched." Poirot took out his tape measure. He measured from the floor to the smear. 5 feet, 8 inches, he said. "Lady Winifred's height?" Hastings asked. 5'7". She could reach it, but only just. Dr. Willen added, "And you think someone else wiped it?" "Yes," Poirot replied. He walked to the stool in the corner, checked its surface. A faint residue was on the rim. "Polish," he said. He returned to the mirror, studied the angle of the smear. The hand moved right to left. "Does that matter?" Hastings asked. "Yes," Poirot replied. "It tells us which hand was used." Poirot stepped back from the mirror. He looked at Hastings. A short hand wiped a tall glass. This house lives by clocks. One clock lies. Poirot stood in the kitchen. His eyes moved to the wall. The clock ticked. "What time do you have?" Poirot asked Mrs. Bromley. 4:20, she said. Poirot checked his watch. 4:23, he corrected. 3 minutes slow? Hastings asked. "Yes," Poirot replied. Mrs. Bromley shrugged. "It has been like that for months." Poirot wrote in his notebook, "Who uses this clock? For the tea bell?" "I do," she said. Poirot turned to the small bell pull in the corner. "You rang it early, yesterday." Mrs. Bromley frowned. "No." Hastings stepped in. "We were told tea came ahead of time." Mrs. Bromley's lips pressed thin. "I followed the clock." Poirot moved to the dining room. He pointed to the sideboard. "This bell connects to the kitchen?" "Yes," Mrs. Bromley replied. Poirot checked the hallway clock. It matched his watch exactly. He returned to the kitchen. "Between 3 and 4 yesterday, which bells rang?" Mrs. Bromley thought for a moment. "The library, then the drawing room." "In what order?" "Library first, drawing room a few minutes later." Poirot tapped his pen. "And where was Nancy?" "Delivering tea," Mrs. Bromley said. Poirot's gaze shifted to Hastings. "Tea arrived early in the library." "Yes," Hastings confirmed. Poirot asked, "How early?" 5 minutes before the hour." Mrs. Bromley said, "Then I was on time for my clock." Poirot wrote a note. "So, tea was early for one room, correct for another." He looked at Riggs. "Where were you?" "In the garage, sir." "Did you see Nancy?" "Yes. She was in the hall, with the tray." Poirot underlined something in his notebook. "She carried tea to the library first?" "Yes," Riggs replied. "And then to the drawing room?" "Yes." Hastings asked, "How long between?" "Not long. A minute or two." Poirot faced Mrs. Bromley again. "That gap is enough for movement between rooms." She said nothing. Poirot moved toward the hallway. The floor was damp near the side door. He crouched. "Yesterday's rain?" Hastings asked. "Yes," Poirot said. He examined the marks. One print faced the drawing room, another faced away. "Same shoe?" Hastings asked. "Yes," Poirot replied. "Size?" "Small," Poirot said. "Likely a woman's." The footprint pointed toward the drawing room and then back again. "The lock scratches say, 'Opened in haste.'" Hastings stood at the desk. "This lock's been scratched," he said. Poirot came over. The marks were fresh. Along the keyhole, the wood was dented. "Opened without care," Poirot said. He pulled the drawer open. Inside were loose papers. He lifted the top sheet. Hastings bent down. "There's a torn corner here." Poirot examined it. The tear was clean. "Something removed quickly," he said. Beneath the papers sat a blotter. Poirot opened it. Ink shadows bled through the thin sheet. Hastings peered closer. "Looks like writing." Poirot turned the blotter. Faint, mirrored letters appeared. 2 words were clear. "She knows." Hastings frowned. "Knows what?" Poirot kept reading. Another word showed jealous, and below it, 2 initials. "Whose initials?" Hastings asked. Poirot stayed silent. The drawer smelled faintly of cedar. Poirot closed his eyes for a second. He placed the blotter down. Hastings pressed. "Well?" Poirot opened his eyes. "The initials are M.R., he said. Hastings repeated them slowly. "R." Poirot put the papers back in the drawer. He closed it firmly. Blaine entered the room. "What are you doing?" he asked. Poirot replied evenly. "Examining your desk." Blaine's eyes moved to the blotter. "That's private." Poirot gestured at the scratches. "This was opened in haste, not by you?" Blaine did not answer. Hastings spoke. "The blotter shows a note about jealousy." With initials, Blaine's face tightened. "That's nothing to do with this," Poirot asked. "Then what does it mean?" "Business," Blaine said shortly. "Which business?" Poirot pressed. "Not your concern." Poirot stepped closer. "A man's name or a woman's?" Blaine's eyes hardened. "Leave it." Hastings glanced at Poirot. Poirot's expression stayed flat. He turned back to the desk. "Where is the missing paper?" Poirot asked. Blaine's reply was sharp. "Destroyed." "By you?" "Yes." Poirot wrote a line in his notebook. "You admit to removing it?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because it was personal." Poirot shut his notebook. "Personal matters often lead to dangerous ones." Blaine looked away. "I told you. It's nothing." Poirot walked to the door. Hastings followed. Neither spoke until they reached the hall. Poirot stopped. He opened his notebook again. He wrote the initials. M.R. on a fresh page. Poirot looked at Hastings. "These initials match a bottle in Nancy's room. On the dresser, an empty lilac bottle, freshly replaced." Poirot stepped into the room. Nancy stood by the door. Her hands were clasped. He moved to the dresser. An empty lilac perfume bottle sat in the center. The label was unmarked. "When did you finish this?" Poirot asked. Nancy shifted. "This morning." "It is new?" "Yes, yesterday." Poirot lifted it. The glass was clean. No dust on the rim. He opened the top drawer. A folded brown chemist wrap lay inside. He unfolded it. The shop name matched the receipt from Riggs. "You bought this yourself?" Nancy shook her head. "It was given to me." "By whom?" She hesitated. "Mrs. Broomley." Hastings glanced at Poirot. "The same as Riggs said," he murmured. Poirot closed the drawer. He pointed to a ribbon on the dresser. It was pale blue, with a small knot. "This is yours." "No," Nancy said. "It belonged to the lady. She gave it to me." Poirot turned to the mirror above the dresser. It was adjusted high, too high for Nancy's height. "Do you use a stool here?" "Yes, for dusting." "Where is it?" Nancy pointed to the corner. Poirot walked over. The stool's top was smooth, but the rim carried a faint smear. He touched it. Polish residue came away on his finger. "You polished the mirror?" "Number wine only dusted." Hastings said, "This is mirror polish." Nancy looked down. "I didn't touch it." Poirot set the stool back. He scanned the floor. The boards under the stool were slightly marked. "When did you last move this?" Poirot asked. "Yesterday," Nancy said quietly. "For what?" "To reach the shelf," she answered. Poirot returned to the dresser. He tapped the perfume bottle. "Why keep it, if empty?" Nancy said nothing. Her eyes shifted toward Mrs. Broomley, who had stepped into the doorway. Mrs. Broomley's voice was firm. "It's just rubbish. I'll throw it away." "No," Poirot said. "It will stay." He lifted the bottle again. The scent still clung inside. He set it down carefully. Hastings crouched near the stool. His hand brushed the lower step. A single blue thread was stuck to the wood, the same shade as the maid's uniform. Poirot draws sight lines with chalk. Poirot stood before the vanity. He held a stick of chalk. "Observe, Hastings," he said. He marked the mirror's surface. A thin line stretched from the top corner to the center. "This is the smear's height," Poirot continued. 5 feet 8, Hastings noted. Poirot nodded. "And the maid?" 5'2", Hastings replied. Poirot placed the stool in front of the vanity. "Stand here," he told Hastings. Hastings climbed up. "Now, reach," Poirot instructed. Hastings touched the top corner easily. Poirot nodded again. A stool was used. He crouched to the floor. A faint mark on the boards matched the stool's leg. "Same position yesterday," he murmured. Poirot examined the smear itself. He traced it lightly. "Right to left," he said. Hastings leaned in. "You can tell?" "Yes. The streak fades on the left side." Poirot stepped to the side. He gestured at the fireplace. "Now." The bruise on the head was at this height. He measured from the mantel edge to the floor. The figure matched the smear's lower point. Hastings frowned. "So, the person who wiped the mirror is connected to the fall?" Poirot's tone was flat. "Yes." He set the chalk on the table, took a tape measure from his pocket, measured the vanity's full height. "Without the stool, the maid could not reach," Poirot said. "With it, she could." Hastings crossed his arms. Then it was Nancy. Poirot raised a hand. "We do not conclude too soon." He examined the frame. Small fibers clung near the smear. He removed one with tweezers. "Wool, uniform, sleeve?" Hastings asked. "Yes." Dragged across the surface while wiping. Poirot placed the fiber into an envelope. He returned to the chalk marks. "This angle," he said, pointing, "shows where the person stood." He measured again, from the stool's edge to the mirror. "Close stance, leaning forward," Poirot added. Hastings asked, "To see themselves?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, "or to see if the mark was gone." He dusted his hands. The chalk squeaked against the glass. Poirot stepped back. He looked at Hastings. "One more detail," he said. He moved to the fireplace, placed his palm on the cold marble. After the impact, the body's position would have been here. Hastings followed his line of sight. The reflection in the mirror matched the angle. Then the mirror showed it, Hastings said slowly. Poirot nodded once. "A copycat face. Looked back from this mirror," Poirot said. "Broomley finds a lilac-scented cloth under Nancy's bed. Mrs. Broomley bent down. She reached under the frame. Her hand came out, holding a folded cloth. 'I suppose you'll want to see this,' she said. Poirot took it, unfolded it slowly. A strong lilac scent rose from the fabric. Hastings leaned in. 'Under her bed?' 'Yes,' Mrs. Broomley replied. Nancy's face tightened. 'I've never seen that before,' she said quickly. Poirot examined the folds. The creases were sharp. 'Freshly pressed,' he murmured. He rubbed the cloth between his fingers. Fine fibers clung to the edges. 'From a towel press,' Poirot said. Hastings sniffed it. 'It's overpowering.' Poirot nodded. 'Too strong for use. This was doused deliberately.' Mrs. Broomley folded her arms. "It's hers." Poirot looked at her. "You are certain?" "Who else?" she said. Poirot turned to Nancy. She shook her head again. "Not mine." Hastings asked, "Then how did it get here?" Nancy didn't answer. Poirot laid the cloth on the dresser, pressed a corner to his nose again. "Same lilac as the empty bottle," he said. He pointed to the creases. "These folds are wrong. For storage under a bed." Mrs. Broomley said nothing. Her eyes stayed on Nancy. Hastings stepped closer to Poirot. "She's trying to frame her," he whispered. Poirot's expression didn't change. He made no protest, simply wrote in his notebook. Nancy's voice shook. "Why would I hide that?" Poirot didn't reply. Instead, he asked, "When was the bed last cleaned beneath?" Mrs. Broomley answered quickly, "2 days ago." "By whom?" "Nancy," she said. Poirot closed the notebook, picked up the cloth again, held it by one corner. Riggs stepped into the doorway. He glanced at the cloth. His eyes flicked to Mrs. Broomley. Poirot noticed. "Riggs," he said, "you recognize this?" "No, sir," Riggs replied too quickly. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "You hesitate." Riggs swallowed. "It's just lilac makes me think of yesterday." "Because you bought it?" Poirot asked. "Yes," Riggs said. Hastings asked, "For the lady?" "That's what I was told." Riggs looked down. "She made me buy it." Poirot stepped forward. "She who?" Chimes. Footsteps. Kettle. No room for a stranger. Poirot stood in the hall. Hastings read from his notes. "Library bell at 3:48. Drawing-room bell at 3:53. Poirot nodded. "Kitchen clock was 3 minutes slow." Mrs. Broomley confirmed. "Yes, I followed it." Poirot pointed to Riggs. "You were in the garage from 3:30 to 4?" "Yes, sir." "And saw no one enter or leave the house?" "No, sir." Poirot turned to Nancy. "You carried tea to the library?" "Yes." "What time?" "Before 4, I remember. The clock striking just as I left." "You then went to the drawing-room?" "Yes, straight after." Poirot checked his watch. "Distance between?" 1 minute, Hastings answered. "That leaves a gap of 4 minutes," Poirot said. Mrs. Broomley spoke. "Enough for her to be in the drawing-room before the fall." Poirot looked at Nancy. Her hands tightened. "I didn't hurt her." "But you spoke to her." Nancy hesitated. "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes." "What was said?" Nancy's eyes dropped. "She told me to stop pretending to be her." "Her words exactly?" "She said I was pathetic, that I could never be her, that I looked cheap." Hastings glanced at Poirot. "That's cruel," he said. Poirot's tone stayed flat. "And your reply?" Nancy swallowed. "I said nothing. I left." "Immediately?" "Yes." Poirot stepped closer. "You admire her jewelry?" "Yes." "You wore something of hers?" Nancy nodded once. "The brooch. She knew." Poirot wrote in his notebook. "When did you return it?" "I left it on the mantel." "Before or after the confrontation?" "After." Poirot closed the notebook. "The fire was lit?" "Yes," Nancy replied. Hastings added, "I heard the pop of the wood when we entered later." Poirot tapped the side of his notebook, "Which means the room was occupied just before the fall." Mrs. Broomley crossed her arms. "Occupied by her?" Poirot ignored her, looked at Nancy again. "You are certain? You left at once?" "Yes." Poirot stepped aside, moved to the mirror in the hall. "You passed here." "Yes. Did you touch it?" Nancy's lips pressed tight. She looked away. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I touched the mirror. All together now. No escape routes." Poirot closed the door. Everyone was in the drawing-room. Blaine, Mrs. Broomley, Riggs Nancy, Hastings. "No one leaves," Poirot said. He stood by the mantel. In this case, there was no stranger. The killer was here, inside the house. No one spoke. Poirot pointed to the empty lilac bottle. It was bought for Nancy, a gift. Nancy's eyes dropped to the floor. Poirot continued. Mrs. Broomley passed it. Through Riggs. Riggs brought it back. The lady saw it. "She took it," Poirot said. "She hated lilac. But she hated something more. Imitation." Nancy's shoulders sank. She wore the brooch that morning. Nancy copied her. The brooch was bent in the attempt to remove it. During the struggle, Mrs. Broomley's hands tightened on her arms. Poirot went on. They were alone. Words were exchanged. The ladies were cruel. Nancy said nothing. She pushed. Nancy flinched. The push was enough. Lady Winifred struck her head. On the mantel edge, instant death. Silence. Poirot's tone stayed even. What followed was panic. A mirror had been touched. It held the image of the confrontation. Hastings frowned. Image? Poirot nodded. A smear, at 5'8". Nancy is shorter. She stood on a stool to wipe it away. Nancy's voice broke. "I didn't mean—" Poirot raised a hand. "You meant to erase the humiliation. But you erased nothing else. The perfume remained. The bent brooch remained. The stool remained." Mrs. Broomley said sharply, "You can't—" Poirot cut her off. "I can. The timeline leaves no other hand. 4 minutes between tea and the fall. No one else in the room." Riggs shifted uneasily. Poirot looked at Blaine. "You knew something." Blaine's jaw moved. "I suspected." "You burned a letter," Poirot said. "It was from the lady. It accused Nancy of copying her. She wanted Nancy dismissed." Blaine stared at Nancy. She had nothing else. "This house is cruel." Poirot stepped back. "She has the law to face now. That is enough." The room was still. Hastings could hear his own heartbeat. The faint smear of soot marked the mantel edge. Poirot closed his notebook. He turned toward the door. Blaine spoke, low. "Then it's on me. I fed the imitation. I only wanted her to stop." Nancy's voice was thin, her hands tight together. "I only wanted her to stop." Poirot faced her. "You pushed her." Nancy nodded once. "Yes." "There was no plan?" "No." "No theft?" "No." "Then why?" Poirot asked. Nancy looked down. "She called me names, said I was cheap, that I was nothing." Mrs. Broomley stood rigid, her jaw tight. "You should have walked away," she said. Nancy's reply was low. "I did. But first, I pushed her." Hastings watched her closely. "Was it hard?" "No," Nancy said. "Just enough to move her back." Poirot's tone stayed calm. "And she struck the mantel?" "Yes, I heard it." "The sound?" Nancy closed her eyes. "Yes. Then, nothing." Mrs. Broomley's arms dropped. "You've ruined yourself," she said. Nancy's head lifted. "I was already ruined here." Poirot stepped to the door. He opened it a little, called for the constable. His voice, quiet. "Inspector Japp will need her taken in," Poirot said. Nancy did not move, her eyes on the floor. Hastings stepped between her and the door. "Not yet," Hastings told the constable. "She can wait a moment." Poirot gave a small nod. He walked back to Nancy. "You will tell the inspector exactly what you told me," he said. Nancy's voice shook. "Yes." Mrs. Broomley moved toward the fireplace. She touched the mantel edge. Her hand lingered there. She turned away. Poirot looked at her. "You knew she was not dangerous." Before this, Mrs. Broomley said nothing. Hastings helped Nancy stand. Her steps, slow. Her sleeve brushed his coat. The hall was quiet. Nancy's breath caught at once. She held it in. Poirot glanced at the rain-marked umbrella stand. He looked at Hastings. "Keep her close. They will be waiting. Outside." Nancy's hands trembled. She wiped her cheek with her sleeve. Salt wet the wool. Hastings angled his body between her and the hall. He guided her toward the door. The constable followed. Poirot stayed behind them. They reached the front step. The sound outside, faint but steady. Beyond the half-open door, microphones hissed. The press was waiting. The mirror is straight now. It shows everyone, smaller. Blaine stood in the hall. The constable waited beside him. "I'll give my statement now," Blaine said. Poirot nodded. "No interviews, no spectacle." Blaine agreed. "I'll keep it short. She was young. She made mistakes. So did I." Poirot watched him. "You encouraged her imitation." Blaine's eyes dropped. "Yes. It fed her pride," Poirot said, "and the lady's humiliation." Blaine's voice was quiet. "I see that now." The constable led him toward the study. The door closed. Hastings stood near the mirror. It was level on the wall. No smears. Poirot joined him. "A crime of mirrors," Poirot said. Hastings looked at him. "Meaning?" "I see 3 motives in one," Poirot explained. "Imitation, humiliation, preservation. Each visible in reflection, if one knows how to look." Hastings opened his notebook. He wrote the phrase down, tore the page, folded it into the case file. The sound of the coal fire was fading. The heat barely reached the hall. Poirot stepped back from the mirror. In this house, pride was not silent. It was spoken. Warn, scented Hastings, closed the file. Yet it killed quietly. Poirot gave a short nod. "Yes, pride kills quietly." From outside, a car door closed. Poirot turned toward the window. "Riggs is ready," Hastings said. "He waits by the car." Poirot put on his hat, walked to the front door, stopped. "You have the notes?" he asked. Hastings held them up. "Filed. Every detail. Good," Poirot said. "We may need them again." They stepped toward the entry. Poirot opened the door. The wet road air came in. Hastings looked out. The constable's car moved slowly away. The press had scattered. They stepped outside. The cold made Hastings draw his coat tighter. Poirot walked to the car. Riggs opened the rear door. "Whitehaven Mansions, sir?" "Yes," Poirot replied. Hastings climbed in first. Poirot followed. The door shut. The engine started. The sound faded as the car rolled forward. Back in the hall, an envelope slid under the front door. Poirot's name was written on it. The postmark read, Vienna. The date was wrong.